The wrench slipped from Rodney Walsh's greasy fingers and clanged against the metal floor. He cursed under his breath and bent down to retrieve it, his back protesting after another long shift in the guts of Orbital Station Arcturus. 16 hours today, 17 yesterday. The numbers blurred together after 5 years of this routine. Around him, the engineering deck hummed with the sound of machinery that never stopped, never rested, never felt the weight of grief pressing down like gravity itself. He preferred it this way. The machines needed him. They broke, he fixed them. Simple, clean, no complicated emotions to navigate. Rodney tightened the final bolt on the coolant regulator and wiped his hands on his jumpsuit. The fabric was permanently stained with grease and hydraulic fluid. His supervisor, a tall insectoid Klendari named Hirik, would have words about that tomorrow. But tomorrow was 12 hours away, and right now Rodney just wanted food and silence. The station's main corridor was crowded during shift change. Aliens of a dozen species moved in clusters, chattering in various languages. The Mytharians with their crystalline bodies clicked and chimed at each other. A group of furry Volnari shared some joke that made them bare their many teeth in laughter. Even the stoic Grellians had their partners and companions. Rodney walked through them all like a ghost. 5 years on the station, and he knew maybe 3 people by name. That was fine. Better than fine. Getting close to people meant eventually losing them. And he had learned that lesson in the worst way possible that he grabbed a nutrition pack from the dispenser and headed to his usual spot in the observation deck. The vast window showed the asteroid belt stretching out into the darkness, dotted with mining drones and transport ships. Somewhere out there, beyond the belt, beyond the outer planets, was Titan. He never looked in that direction. The nutrition pack tasted like processed nothing, but Rodney ate it anyway. Fuel for the body. Nothing more. He was about to leave when his personal comm unit beeped. A message from station security flashed across the small screen. All engineering staff. Unknown energy signature detected in Cargo Bay 7. Need analysis team for safety clearance. Rodney frowned. Cargo Bay 7 was supposed to be empty tonight, except for confiscated items from a smuggling bust last week. He pulled up the sensor data on his comm unit, and his frown deepened. The energy signature was biological, not technological. Warm, alive, and fading fast. Protocol said to wait for the full security team. Protocol said a lot of things. But Rodney had spent 5 years following every rule, doing everything by the book, and it had not made him feel any less hollow inside. He stood up and headed for the cargo bay. The lower levels of the station were quieter at night. His footsteps echoed in the empty corridors. When he reached Cargo Bay 7, he used his engineering override code to open the door. The lights inside were set to minimal power, casting long shadows across stacks of sealed containers. Rodney pulled out his handheld scanner and followed the energy, reading deeper into the bay. The signature was coming from behind a stack of legitimate mining equipment, tucked away where it would not be noticed during casual inspection. He squeezed between 2 large containers and stopped at a stasis pod. Cracked, leaking containment fluid across the floor. Inside was a creature he recognized from old xenobiology texts. Draknari, a dragon species that had died out when their homeworld went supernova 70 years ago. Except this one was not dead. Not yet. The hatchling was small, barely the size of his torso, with dull gray scales and wings folded tight against its body. Its chest rose and fell in shallow, irregular breaths. Even in the dim light, Rodney could see it was dying that he should report this. Call security. Let the xenobiology team take over. They would put the creature in a proper medical facility, study it, maybe even save it. Maybe they would just document its death for their research files. Another extinct species, another tragedy for the galactic records. Rodney reached into the pod and carefully lifted the hatchling out. It was warm despite the failing stasis field, and surprisingly light. Up close, he could see its scales were not quite gray, but a faded copper color like old pennies. Its eyes were closed, but he could feel the faint flutter of its heartbeat against his palms. Something shifted in his chest. A feeling he had buried so deep he thought it was gone forever. The hatchling needed help. Needed someone. And for the first time in 5 years, Rodney wanted to be that someone that he tucked the creature inside his jacket, checked the corridor outside, and headed back to his quarters. With each step, he expected someone to stop him, to demand an explanation, to enforce the rules he was breaking. But the corridors stayed empty, and his quarters were exactly as he had left them that morning. Rodney laid the hatchling on his bunk and really looked at it. So small, so fragile, so completely alone in a universe that had already taken everything from its species. "Yeah," he whispered. "I know how that feels." The hatchling's breathing was getting worse. Rodney pulled up every file he could find on Draknari biology and started working. He had fixed broken machines for 5 years. How different could this be? Very different, as it turned out. But Rodney Walsh had nowhere else to be, nothing else to do, and for the first time since the accident, a reason to try. 3 days passed in a blur of research and improvisation. Rodney's quarters looked like a medical lab had exploded inside an engineering workshop. Cables ran from his personal computer to a makeshift scanner he had built from spare parts. Empty nutrition packs littered the floor beside containers of mineral supplements he had carefully mixed according to ancient Draknari dietary guidelines. The hatchling lay on his bunk, surrounded by heating elements Rodney had rigged to maintain her body temperature. He had confirmed that much from the biological scans. She was female, approximately 3 months old, and suffering from severe stasis sickness combined with malnutrition. Rodney sat on the floor beside the bunk, carefully measuring out another dose of nutrients. His hands shook slightly from lack of sleep. He had called in sick for 2 shifts, something he had never done before. Hirik had sounded shocked on the comm. "Walsh, are you dying?" "No, just need a few days." "In 5 years, you have taken 0 sick days." "Yeah, well, first time for everything." He mixed the nutrients with water and used a small feeding tube to get it into the hatchling's mouth. She swallowed reflexively, which was a good sign. Better than yesterday, when she had barely responded at all. Rodney leaned back against the wall and closed his eyes. Just for a moment. Just a rest that a touch on his hand woke him. Not physical, something else. A feeling that was not quite a feeling, pressing gently against his thoughts like someone knocking on a door. He opened his eyes and found himself staring into 2 large, amber eyes. The hatchling was awake. "Hey there," Rodney whispered, afraid to move too quickly. "Welcome back." The hatchling tilted her head, studying him with an intelligence that sent a chill down his spine. Then that pressure came again, stronger this time. Not words, emotions, fear, confusion, pain, and underneath it all, a desperate seeking warmth. Without thinking, Rodney reached out and gently stroked the hatchling's head. Her scales were smoother than he expected, almost soft. The pressure in his mind shifted. The fear remained, but it was joined by something new: relief. Safety. Connection. Rodney felt his throat tighten. When was the last time anyone had looked at him like that? When was the last time he had mattered to another living being? "You're going to be okay," he said, and meant it. "I've got you." The hatchling made a small sound, somewhere between a chirp and a purr. Then she pressed her head more firmly against his hand, and that feeling came again, clearer now, warm. "Safe. You." "Yeah," Rodney said softly. "Me." Over the next week, the hatchling recovered faster than Rodney had dared hope. Her scales brightened from dull gray to a rich copper color that caught the light when she moved. She started following him around his quarters, her small claws clicking on the metal floor. When he worked at his desk, she curled up nearby. When he slept, she pressed against his side, radiating warmth. The telepathic connection grew stronger each day. Rodney learned to recognize her moods, her needs, her thoughts. She was smart, frighteningly smart. Within days, she understood his words even if she could not speak them. She learned which objects were fragile, which areas were off-limits, which times meant he had to leave for work. That was becoming a problem. Rodney had gone back to his shifts, but he could not leave the hatchling alone in his quarters for 16 hours. She panicked without him nearby. He could feel her distress through their connection, a sharp anxiety that made it hard to concentrate on his work. On the 3rd day back, he made a decision. During his break, he went to the lower maintenance shafts. These were old access tunnels that most of the station crew had forgotten about. Rodney had used them before to run new cables and bypass damaged sections. He found a junction point that was warm, dry, and completely off the main pathways. That evening, he brought the hatchling down to show her. She explored the space cautiously, her tail swishing behind her. Through their bond, Rodney felt her considering, evaluating, and finally accepting. "This is where you stay during my shifts," he explained, setting up some blankets and heating elements. "I know it's not great, but it is safe. No one comes down here." The hatchling chirped and bumped her head against his leg. Through their connection came a clear thought, more complex than anything she had sent before. "Sad. Away from you. But understand. Keep secret. Keep safe." Rodney knelt down and looked into those amber eyes. "I need to give you a name. Something I can call you." The hatchling tilted her head, waiting that he thought about it. Nothing obvious or common. Something that fit who she was becoming. Smart. Calm despite everything she had been through. Ancient wisdom in a young body. "Sage," he said. "How about Sage?" The response through their bond was immediate and warm. "Yes. Sage. Good. Like you. Rodney. Rodney. My favorite human." He laughed, the sound strange in his own ears. How long since he had laughed? "You're only human, technically." Sage made a sound that might have been a laugh too, and the feeling that came through their connection was unmistakable. She was happy, despite everything, despite being alone in the galaxy, despite losing her entire species. She was happy because she had him, and Rodney realized, with a mixture of joy and terror, that he was happy too. For the first time in 5 years, he looked forward to tomorrow. Not because it would be the same as today, but because it would be different. Because Sage would be there. "All right," he said, standing up. "Let me show you how this works. I come get you after my shift. Every day. I promise." Through their bond came one clear, simple thought. Promise. Together. Family. Rodney's eyes stung. He nodded, not trusting his voice. Yeah. Family. 2 weeks after finding Sage, Rodney stood in the engineering bay, trying to focus on a malfunctioning plasma relay while his mind kept drifting to the maintenance shaft 3 levels down. Through their bond, he could feel Sage's boredom mixed with patience. She was growing fast, already twice the size she had been when he found her. Too fast, maybe. "Walsh, you look terrible." The voice belonged to Keyworks, a Metherian engineer whose crystalline body chimed softly when he moved. "Are you sick?" "You are never sick." "I am fine," Rodney said, tightening a bolt with more force than necessary. "Just tired. Tired for 2 weeks." Keyworks leaned closer, his faceted eyes catching the light. "You also smell different. Chemical signatures are off. And you've been taking food packs from the dispensers in bulk. 8 yesterday, 12 the day before." Rodney's hand froze on a wrench. He had not realized anyone was paying attention to his food consumption. Sage ate more each day as she grew, and he had been sneaking extra rations to supplement what he could synthesize. "I am eating more," he said carefully. "Exercise routine. You do not have an exercise routine. In 5 years, I have never seen you in the gym. Started recently." Keyworks made a sound like wind chimes in a storm, the Metherian equivalent of a skeptical laugh. "Walsh, we have worked together for 3 years. I know you keep to yourself. I respect that. But if you need help with something, I would help. You are a good engineer. Good person. Just very sad." The blunt assessment caught Rodney off guard. He looked at Keyworks, really looked at him, and saw genuine concern in those alien eyes. When was the last time anyone had noticed he existed beyond his ability to fix things? "I appreciate that," Rodney said quietly. "Really, but I am handling it." Before Keyworks could respond, an alarm blared through the engineering bay. Both of them turned to their displays. Rodney's stomach dropped. Security alert. Lower maintenance shafts. Unauthorized access detected. Section 7B. That was Sage's section. Rodney was moving before he could think, running toward the access ladders. Behind him, Keyworks called out, but the words did not register. Through the bond, he felt Sage's sudden spike of fear. Danger. Strange person. Coming closer. Rodney dropped down 3 ladder levels, his boots barely touching the rungs. He hit the corridor at a sprint and nearly collided with a large Grellian wearing security colors. Torvin, the head of station security, built like a tank with dark blue scales and eyes that missed nothing. Walsh, Torvin said, his hand resting on his weapon. Interesting that you arrive so quickly. I was investigating some unusual energy readings in this area. Care to explain why you are here? Through the bond, Rodney felt Sage hiding just around the corner, trembling. She could sense his fear, which only made her more afraid. He forced himself to breathe slowly, to project calm through their connection. Working, Rodney said, checking the power conduits. We have been having fluctuations. Interesting. Torvin did not move. Because according to the work logs, this section has not been scheduled for maintenance in 6 months. Also interesting, these energy readings. Biological, warm-blooded, about 60 kilograms. His eyes narrowed. Want to try again? Rodney's mind raced. He could lie, but Torvin was not stupid. He could run, but where would that get him? He could fight, but that was laughable. Or he could trust that the Grellian security chief, who had always been fair, if strict, might understand. If I show you something, Rodney said slowly, can you promise to hear me out before you report it? That depends entirely on what you show me. Not a yes, but not a no. Rodney took a breath and made his choice. He stepped around the corner and called out softly, Sage, it is okay. Come here. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Sage emerged from her hiding spot, her copper scales gleaming in the dim light. She was magnificent now, her neck long and graceful, her wings folded neatly against her body. She moved to Rodney's side and pressed against his leg, her eyes fixed on Torvin. The security chief froze. His hand dropped from his weapon. That is a Draknari. Yes, they are extinct. Almost. Where did you find her? Cargo Bay 7, dying in a broken stasis pod. The smugglers you busted 2 weeks ago had her hidden. Torvin was quiet for a long moment. Sage sent nervous feelings through the bond, and Rodney stroked her head reassuringly. Finally, the Grellian spoke. My species was dying once. Plague. 90% mortality rate. The Galactic Council quarantined our world and left us to die. They said it was protocol. They said it was necessary to protect other species. He looked at Sage, then at Rodney. Human medical teams broke that quarantine. They came anyway with hazard suits and experimental treatments. They saved us. Broke every rule in the book to do it. Rodney felt hope flutter in his chest. So you understand. I understand that sometimes the right choice and the legal choice are different things. Torvin knelt down, making himself less threatening. Sage watched him carefully. I also understand that she cannot stay hidden much longer. She's growing too fast. Within a month, she will be the size of a transport pod. I know. I just need time to figure something out. You have 3 days. Commander Felix is coming for her quarterly inspection. She will find Sage. Torvin stood up. I will not report this. Yet. But Walsh, you need a better plan than hoping no one notices a dragon on a mining station. After Torvin left, Rodney sat down hard against the wall. Sage curled up beside him, her head in his lap. Through their bond came a thought, clear and determined. Not alone. We together. Find way. Rodney ran his hand along her neck, feeling the strength in her growing body. Yeah, together. Always. But 3 days. That was not much time to save a miracle. Rodney barely slept that night. He lay on his bunk with Sage curled beside him, her breathing deep and steady while his mind spun through possibilities. Every plan he came up with had fatal flaws. Smuggle her off station? To where? Draknari were supposed to be extinct. Her appearance anywhere would cause investigations. Hide her somewhere else? Where could you hide a growing dragon on a mining station? Through their bond, he felt Sage dream. Images of flying through open space, of warmth and safety, of him standing beside her. She trusted him completely. That trust felt heavier than any responsibility he had carried before. His comm unit buzzed just before dawn. A message from Torvin. My quarters. Now, have an idea. Rodney carefully extracted himself from Sage's embrace and headed up 3 levels. Torvin's quarters were neat and sparse, decorated with Grellian military honors and a single photo of what looked like family members. The security chief gestured to a chair. "I spoke with Quillix last night," Torvin said without preamble. "He was worried about you. Followed you down to the maintenance shaft after the alarm. Saw Sage." Rodney's heart sank. "Torvin, I can explain to him. He will not report it." "I know. I already told him everything." Torvin pulled up a holographic display. "He wants to help. So do I. But we need a real solution, not just hiding and hoping." "What kind of solution?" "Legal protection. If Sage is classified as a sentient refugee, she falls under galactic convention protections. She cannot be taken by research corporations or governments. She has rights." Rodney leaned forward. "But she is the last of her species. They will still want to study her. Not if she has a legal guardian who can refuse on her behalf." Torvin met his eyes. The idea was so simple and so impossible at the same time. "Commander Felix will never approve that. She follows every regulation to the letter, which is why we need to make this about regulations, not emotions." Torvin brought up more files. "The station charter allows for emergency refugee status in cases of immediate threat to life. Sage qualifies. Those smugglers are going to sell her. That is trafficking of a sentient being. Illegal under 12 different laws. That might work for temporary protection. What about long-term? Long-term, we need the station council to vote on permanent residency. That requires showing she is not a threat and has proper care arrangements." Torvin looked at Sage's medical files that Rodney had compiled. "Your documentation is excellent. You have been treating her better than most medical facilities could. That helps." Rodney felt a flicker of hope, quickly dampened by reality. "The council votes in 2 weeks. Felix inspects in 3 days. She will find Sage before we can even present the case. Then we need to control how she finds out." Torvin stood up. "We arrange a meeting. Present Sage ourselves before the inspection. Show that we have been responsible, that Sage is safe and well cared for. Make it look like a solution, not a problem. You really think that will work?" "No idea." Torvin's expression was grim. "But it is better than having Felix discover a dragon in the maintenance shaft during her inspection. That way ends with Sage in a cargo hold heading to a research station." They spent the next 2 days preparing. Quillix helped compile technical data on Sage's growth rate, dietary needs, and telepathic abilities. Torvin drafted the legal arguments for refugee status. Rodney wrote a detailed report on how he found Sage and everything he had done to care for her. The morning before the inspection, they scheduled a meeting with Commander Felix. Her office was pristine and cold, much like the Centauran commander herself. She sat behind her desk, her silver skin gleaming under the lights, her forearms folded in a posture of extreme skepticism. "You have requested this meeting for a matter of station security," she said. "Explain." Rodney took a breath. Through the bond, he felt Sage waiting in the corridor outside with Torvin. She was nervous, but trying to be brave for him. 3 weeks ago, I discovered a living Draknari hatchling in Cargo Bay 7. She was in a damaged stasis pod, part of the smuggling operation security shut down. I have been caring for her since then." Felix's expression did not change, but 2 of her hands tightened into fists. "You kept this from command for 3 weeks. Yes. You broke protocol, endangered the station, concealed evidence. Yes. What?" The simple question caught him off guard. Rodney looked at his hands, searching for words. "Because she was dying. Because I could help. Because I know what it feels like to be the last one left, and I could not let her go through that alone." Felix was quiet for a moment. "You lost family. Your file mentions an accident on Titan. My wife and daughter. 5 years ago. And this creature, this dragon, she helps with that grief." "No." Rodney met her eyes. "She does not fix it or make it go away. But she gives me a reason to keep going. And I give her a reason to keep going. We help each other. Bring her in." Rodney stepped to the door. Sage entered slowly, her head high despite her nervousness. She was beautiful in the office lights, her copper scales shimmering. She moved to Rodney's side and sat, her tail curling around his legs protectively. Felix stood and walked around her desk. She approached Sage carefully, studying her from every angle. Then she did something unexpected. She knelt down and looked directly into Sage's amber eyes. "Can you understand me?" she asked. Sage nodded slowly. Through their bond, Rodney felt her reaching out, testing whether she could communicate with Felix the way she did with him. "Interesting," Felix murmured. Then she stood and returned to her desk. "I should have you arrested, Walsh. This is an enormous breach of protocol." "I know. However," Felix pulled up files on her display. "The Draknari are protected under 3 separate galactic conventions. Their status as extinct makes this a unique case. And your documentation is thorough." She looked at him. "I will grant temporary refugee status. You will present your case to the Station Council in 2 weeks. If they vote no, she goes to a proper facility." "Understood. Understood." After they left the office, Rodney stopped in the corridor and just breathed. Sage pressed against him, purring. Through the bond came clear feelings. Pride, gratitude, love. 2 weeks, Rodney whispered. "We have 2 weeks to convince the entire Station Council." Sage bumped his hand with her head. Together. Always together. When together, he hoped she was right. The next 2 weeks were a strange mix of normal and surreal. Rodney went to his engineering shifts while Sage stayed in his quarters, which Felix had authorized as temporary housing. Word spread through the station quickly. A dragon. A living Draknari. The last of her kind. Some crew members were curious. They would stop Rodney in the corridors and ask questions. What does she eat? Could she really read minds? Is it true she glows in the dark? Rodney answered patiently, aware that each positive interaction helped their case. Others were afraid. They kept their distance, whispered when Sage passed by, sent anonymous complaints to the Station Council about safety concerns. Torvin investigated each complaint thoroughly and found none of them credible, but the worry remained. The Station Council met on the 14th day. Rodney sat in the gallery with Sage beside him, Torvin and Quillix on his other side. The council chamber was packed. Every seat filled, with more crew members standing along the walls. Everyone wanted to see how this would end. The council consisted of 7 members representing different station departments and species. Felix sat at the center as station commander. To her right was Hirik from engineering, and to her left was the medical director, a gentle Velnari named Shiree. This council will now hear the petition for permanent residency status for the Draknari individual known as Sage, Felix announced. Petitioner Rodney Walsh, you may present your case. Rodney stood, his legs steadier than he expected. He had practiced this. Members of the council, 3 weeks ago, I found Sage dying in a damaged stasis pod. She was being smuggled for illegal sale. I made the choice to save her life, and in doing so, I broke protocol. I do not apologize for that choice. Murmurs ran through the crowd. Felix raised one hand for silence. Sage is intelligent, sentient, and capable of complex thought and emotion. She communicates telepathically and has shown no aggressive behavior. She has been eating a controlled diet, undergoing regular health monitoring, and adapting well to station life. I request that she be granted permanent residency with me as her legal guardian. One of the council members, a stern Grellian named Horvik, spoke up. The Draknari were telepaths. How do we know she is not manipulating crew members? Using her abilities to influence decisions? Her telepathy is empathic, not controlling, Rodney explained. She can sense emotions and send her own feelings, but she cannot force anyone to do anything. Can you prove that? Before Rodney could answer, something extraordinary happened. Sage stood up and stepped forward. Through their bond, Rodney felt her determination. She was going to show them herself. Sage, you do not have to do this, he said quietly. Through the bond came a response. Yes, must show. They need to understand. Sage closed her eyes, and the entire council chamber fell silent. Then Rodney felt it, not just through their personal bond, but as something in the air itself. Sage was projecting outward, letting everyone in the room feel what she felt. The emotions washed over the crowd like a wave. Fear from those early days in the stasis pod. loneliness, deep and aching from being the last of her kind, pain from a sickness that had nearly killed her. And then, breaking through all of that darkness, came warmth, safety, gratitude, the overwhelming feeling of being saved, being cared for, being loved, and woven through it all were images. Rodney's hands, gentle as he fed her, his voice, reading to her from engineering manuals because his presence comforted her, his sadness, which she carried with him because that was what family did. They shared the weight. The projection lasted maybe 30 seconds. When it ended, the chamber was completely silent. Rodney looked around and saw tears on multiple faces, including several council members. Horvick, who had questioned her safety, sat with all four of his hands pressed to his face. Shiree was the first to speak, her voice shaking. I felt no compulsion, no manipulation, only honesty. She looked at Sage with wonder. She shared her truth with us, the good and the bad. That takes remarkable courage. Indeed, Felix's expression had softened slightly. Are there any other concerns from the council? Another member spoke up. What about her long-term care? She is still growing. What happens when she is too large for station quarters? Rodney had prepared for this. I have been working with the engineering department to design an expansion module that could be attached to the station. It would serve as Sage's living space and also function as an emergency shelter for crew members. She generates heat naturally, which could be useful during power failures. And her telepathic abilities could aid in rescue operations if she can locate injured crew members by their emotions. Herrick clicked his mandibles in approval. Walsh submitted those designs to me last week. They are excellent. The module would actually improve station safety. Furthermore, Torvin added, standing up, having a Draknari on this station sends a message to the galaxy. We protect those who cannot protect themselves. We value life over profit. That is worth more than any concerns about logistics. The council members conferred quietly among themselves. Rodney felt Sage's nervousness through the bond and reached down to rest his hand on her neck. Whatever happened, they had done everything they could. Finally, Felix spoke. This council will now vote on granting permanent residency to Sage under the guardianship of Rodney Walsh. All in favor. 5 hands went up immediately. After a moment, the 6th council member, who had been silent throughout, raised his hand as well. Only Horvick abstained, but that was enough. The motion passes, Felix announced. Sage is hereby granted permanent residency on Orbital Station Arcturus. Guardian rights and responsibilities are assigned to Rodney Walsh. She looked at them both. Welcome to the station, Sage. Officially this time. The chamber erupted in noise. Cheering, mostly, though some grumbling from those who had opposed the decision. Rodney barely heard any of it. Through the bond, Sage's joy blazed like a sun, bright and warm and overwhelming that we stay. Together. Always. Rodney knelt down and wrapped his arms around her neck. Yeah, always. 6 months after the council vote, Rodney stood in the newly constructed expansion module and marveled at how much had changed. The space was large enough for Sage to spread her wings fully, with specialized heating systems and viewing ports that gave her a clear view of the stars. She spent hours there, watching ships come and go, her thoughts peaceful and content. Through their bond, she sent him an image of himself at his workbench in the corner of the module. He had moved most of his personal belongings here. It made sense. This was where Sage spent her time, so this was where he wanted to be. Rodney was adjusting a new climate control system when his comm unit buzzed. A message from Felix. Walsh, report to my office. Bring Sage. They made their way through the station corridors. Crew members no longer stared or whispered. Sage had become part of station life. She helped in small ways, using her telepathic sense to locate lost items or check on crew members who were injured in hard-to-reach places. The medical team had learned to trust her instincts about patient conditions. Children loved her most of all. There were 73 juveniles of various species living on the station, and Sage had appointed herself their unofficial guardian. She would curl up in the education center while they played around her, projecting feelings of safety and warmth. Several parents had told Rodney their children slept better knowing Sage was nearby. Felix's office looked different today. Her desk was covered with data pads and holographic displays, all showing news feeds from across the galaxy. She gestured for them to sit. I received an interesting communication this morning, Felix said, from the refuge sanctuary on the border worlds. They specialize in protecting endangered species. Rodney's stomach tightened. Through the bond, he felt Sage's sudden anxiety. What did they want? They wanted to inform me that they have received 7 reports in the past 4 months. 7 separate sightings of Draknari individuals in various locations across the galaxy. Felix turned one of the displays toward them. Sage is not alone. Rodney stared at the images. Dragons of various colors and sizes. Some are clearly young like Sage. Others looked older, scarred by whatever had allowed them to survive when their world died. His hand found Sage's neck, feeling her trembling. Through the bond came confusion, hope, fear, and a desperate question. Others? Really others? Real. They are searching for any living Draknari. Felix continued. The sanctuary wants to create a protected habitat where survivors can live freely. They asked if Sage would be willing to relocate there. The question hit Rodney like a physical blow. Of course she should go. She could be with her own kind, learn about her heritage, maybe even help rebuild her species. It was the logical choice, the right choice, but the thought of losing her made his chest ache in ways he thought he had learned to handle 5 years ago. Sage stood up and moved closer to him, pressing her full weight against his side. Through their bond came fierce, absolute certainty, and oh, stay here, with my favorite human. This is home. She wants to stay, Rodney said quietly. Felix nodded slowly. I suspected as much. However, the sanctuary made another proposal. They suggest Orbital Station Arcturus could serve as a waypoint. If other Draknari are found, they could stop here, meet Sage, learn that they're not alone. We would become part of a network, helping them reconnect. Rodney looked at Sage. Through their bond, he felt her considering this. The idea of meeting others of her kind was terrifying and exciting at the same time. But doing it here, where she felt safe, where Rodney would be with her, that made it possible. What do you think? He asked her aloud. Sage was quiet for a long moment. Then she projected not just to Rodney, but to Felix as well, her thoughts clear and strong. Yes. Help others. Like Rodney helped me. Show them safe. Show them family. But stay here. Always here. Felix allowed herself a small smile. Then it is settled. I will contact the sanctuary and arrange the details. She stood. Walsh, when you found Sage, you thought you were saving one life. It appears you may have helped save an entire species. Walking back to their module, Rodney felt lighter than he had in years. Sage kept pace beside him, her copper scales catching the corridor lights. Crew members called out greetings as they passed. Shirey waved from the medical bay. Torvin nodded from his security post. Even here it clicked a friendly greeting from engineering to I in their module. Rodney sat in his chair while Sage settled beside him. Through the viewing port, he could see the asteroid belt and the endless stars beyond. Somewhere out, there were others like Sage. Lost, alone, thinking they were the last. But they would find this place eventually. They would find Sage, and she would show them what she had learned. That family was not just about blood or species. It was about choice, about the people who stayed when things got hard, about the bonds you built one day at a time. Rodney pulled out the old photo of his wife and daughter that he kept on his workbench now, no longer hidden away. He looked at their faces, feeling the familiar ache of loss, but also something new. Gratitude for what they had given him. Love that did not disappear just because they were gone. Sage's head rested in his lap, her thoughts drowsy and content. Through their bond came words she had learned from him, words she now understood completely. Family. Not replacing what was lost, adding to what remains. Making new love alongside old love. Both real, both precious. Yeah, Rodney whispered, stroking her scales. That is exactly right. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, other Draknari flew their lonely paths, not knowing yet that they had a place to go. A copper-scale dragon who would welcome them. A human engineer who understood loss and second chances. A station full of beings from a dozen worlds who had learned that family came in unexpected forms. Sage fell asleep, her dreams full of flying and stars and the warm presence of her favorite human. Rodney sat with her, watching the galaxy turn, no longer empty, no longer alone, home.